Welcome back, everybody, to our YouTube channel here at Paradyme. We're actually going to introduce a new form of content. This is just going to be a reactionary video on a book that we just recently read, Animal Farm. This is going to be an explanation of the book, and we'll pause and play throughout the video and kind of give our take on it. Me and Jay here, not all the guys are here. David and John aren't going to be here with us, but we'll probably incorporate more videos like this in the future, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. But without more said, we'll get right into the video. This video is called Understanding George Orwell, Animal Farm Explained
by Liam DeBoer.
Worse than the disease. Animal Farm begins on Manor Farm, where the animals are mistreated by their human owner, Mr. Jones. Inspired by a wise boar named Old Major, the animals of Manor Farm unite in a vision of rebellion for a society where all animals are equal and resources are endlessly abundant. After Old Major's death, the animals overthrow Mr. Jones in a violent uprising and establish animalism as their governing philosophy. Initially, life on Animal Farm is marked by idealism and hard work, but as time passes, the pigs consolidate their power and start manipulating the original commandments of animalism to their advantage.
I feel like the breakdown he's giving is almost like you have an understanding of what Animal Farm is.
Yeah.
For people that have never looked into George Orwell, he writes a lot of dystopian, what would you call it, dystopian fiction books?
Allegorical, dystopian books, yeah.
Yeah, and so essentially what this book is about, because I think what he's doing is just explaining from the beginning of the book into it, but essentially the farm is essentially people, but he explains it from the perspective of animals. And so he'll go into more detail, but
yeah, the book is an allegorical example of a historical event in Soviet Russia. And Karl Marx is Old Major, who is a proponent and kind of pushes forth this idea of communism in ancient Russia. And he basically covers all of that through this allegorical story of a farm, originally called Manor Farm, in England, and the animals represent the various different parties involved in that movement. So you have Napoleon, who's supposed to be Stalin, Joseph Stalin. You have Frederick, who's supposed to be Germany. You have Pinkerton, which is supposed to be the West. You have all these different people that are involved in the story. Yeah. That's like it's literally a one-to-one almost. Exact historical breakdown.
Yeah. And he's going to give a lot of description into the book, but this book was very interesting. It's a very short read. We read it, 2 weeks?
Yeah,
not even 2 weeks. So like you could literally read it in a night. And if you are interested in understanding a little bit of history, like communism, Karl Marx, like this is a great introduction to that whole theory. But we'll just continue, and he's going to explain more. But just to give you guys that brief description on like the animals are previous historic figures. Mm-hmm. So we'll go from there.
Originally, the defining commandment was all animals are equal. However, as the pigs become increasingly authoritarian, that commandment now reads, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The novel ends with the famous line, the creatures outside looked from pig to man and from man to pig and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. This illuminates how those who position themselves as the liberators to tyranny more often than not become tyrants themselves. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. And Orwell's Animal Farm masterfully depicts the process of turning into the monster you wish to slay. Over the course of this video, I'm going to break down Animal Farm in great detail, including how the story is an allegory for Marxist revolutions, the historical figures that the characters are modeled after, the weaponization of language manipulation, how tyrants use fear-inducing propaganda as a means of control, the cyclical nature of history, and the lessons we can learn from this.
The biggest thing, like we talked about in our book club, was I think John has a lot of history and understands a lot of this, a lot more than like say me, David, or even Jay. But these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lessons that he's gonna go over in just this video, like we could look back the past 2 years and see a lot of this stuff is applicable to what previously happened. Let's just say in like the needle thing that was going on. Obviously, I don't want to throw that out there, but that's just one example. And if we continue this video, he's going to explain more. But like the fear of propaganda, the manipulation of language. I don't know if anybody's paying attention to the whole world of like sexuality. Like there's a huge change that's happening right in front of us. Depending on where you stand on it, it's just, I think my perspective is just learning about history, and we're not changing anything. We're not new to this. I guess we are new because I'm 27, 28, you're about the same age. Like we're new to this, but this has been played out in history before. Like there's nothing new.
It's just repackaged.
Yeah, repackaged,
Put a
resurfaced.
different bow on it.
Yeah, and it's almost like I almost think of it like the Ray Dalio principles. Like it's the same idea. Like it fails, it doesn't work, and it comes back, and it's coming back, and it fails again. And so it's almost like you can look through the lens of everything like that.
Yeah, the cyclical nature of history. It's going to be a good little subpoint here.
Yeah.
Novel. However, if before we dive in, you wouldn't mind tossing a thumbs up on this video and subscribing to my channel,
that would be great.
Orwell's Animal Farm is a powerful allegory of the Russian Revolution and the rise of Marxism in the early 20th century. The novel draws striking parallels between the events and figures in the book and real historical counterparts, making it a compelling commentary on idealistic political ideologies and their consequences. In the novel, Manor Farm represents Russia under the rule of monarchs. The animal's rebellion against the oppressive human owner, Mr. Jones, mirrors the revolution of 1917, which led to the downfall of the Russian monarchy. The speech given by Old Major, the wise old boar who inspires the rebellion, is meant to symbolize socialist theory and idealism. Old Major introduces animalism, which represents the principles of communism, advocating for equality in the overthrow of the ruling class. The pigs inspired by Old Major represent the Bolsheviks, who led the Russian Revolution and deviated from the original principles of Marxism, leading to the transformation of Russia into a totalitarian state known as the Soviet Union. While some may argue that power corrupted the Bolsheviks and caused them to stray away from their originally well-intentioned aims of equality, a quote from Orwell's most famous novel, 1984, illustrates what he believed to be the true intentions of Marxist revolutionaries. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution, one makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. In essence, Animal Farm serves as a cautionary tale about the centralization of power, the betrayal of revolutionary ideals, and the dangers of totalitarianism, using the Russian Revolution and Marxism as its backdrop to deliver these profound themes. Now, let's break down the key characters.
The revolution in the book is referred to the working class, right? Like that's essentially the working class is what started a lot of the revolution.
Yeah, in Animal Farm, Old Major gives that speech, and then the pigs pick it up. The animals all are kind of on the same page.
Yeah.
So yeah, the working class, the upper class. Well, the cat was kind of in and out, but yeah, the sheep, all the different people were on board, and then it just kind of took all the things falling into place, like what's his name, Mr. Jones, the old owner, to come out and start whipping the animals that they started the rebellion. So
yeah, and it turned into a centralization of power, and it changes from there.
In George Orwell's Animal Farm, each of the characters represents very specific people throughout history. Mr. Jones, the irresponsible and neglectful owner of the manor farm, who the animals rebel against, symbolizes the last Russian Tsar, Nicholas II. Mr. Jones's poor management and cruelty of the animals parallel the oppressive and incompetent rule of the Russian monarchy. Old Major, the elderly boar who inspires the animals' rebellion, is a representation of Karl Marx. In his speech, Old Major passionately declares, man is the
Crazy,
only
dude.
creature that
He's the one that
consumes
passes in the
without
beginning, right?
producing.
Yeah.
Yet
does.
he
That's
is
why
lord
they
of
come up
all
with,
the
like,
animals. He sets them to
ideology
work. He
that
gives back to them
stands
the bare minimum
hundreds of
that will
years.
prevent them from starving.
Yeah, and also
the
too,
rest
like-
he keeps for himself. This is
I
identical
don't know.
to how Karl Marx describes business owners in the Communist Manifesto. Snowball, one of the two pigs vying for leadership after the rebellion, represents Leon Trotsky. He is a charismatic and idealistic leader advocating for a global revolution, much like Trotsky's vision of a worldwide workers' revolution. Napoleon, the other pig in the power struggle, symbolizes Joseph Stalin. He represents a ruthless and power-hungry tyrant who gradually becomes a dictator, reflecting Stalin's rise to power and his oppressive rule. Squealer, the third pig in Napoleon's right-hand man, represents the propaganda outlet of the Soviet Union called Pravda, which in Russian means truth. He skillfully manipulates language and twists the truth to justify the pig's oppressive actions. This is displayed in his response when animals of the farm accuse the pigs of hoarding resources. "Comrades," he cried, "you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are doing this in a spirit of selfishness and privilege.
I love the reader.
Many
this,
of us
like, the
actually
audiobook.
dislike milk and
He does
apples.
a whole
I
accent and
dislike
everything.
them myself.
Comrades.
Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health. Milk and apples, this has been proven by science, comrades, contain substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig. We pigs are brain workers. The whole management and organization of this farm depends on us." The dogs of the farm, which Napoleon steals from their parents and raises in isolation, act as his enforcers. and
That
the
was
equivalent-
actually a big point that we pointed out in our book club too, in our episode. Like in the Revolutionary, during all these speeches from the pigs, they solely believed that the work that they made and they did for the farm was solely dependent on them, and they
It was
took
for
away
them.
the human, for them, by them.
Yeah.
Like everything was through their own labor and for their own benefit, which took away the human hand, but they neglected the fact that the human hand actually had a benefit in like helping a lot of things and making things run a bit smoother. But they were sort of blind to it because they didn't know any other. It was almost out of ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I noticed in the book is that there's a pattern. Like historically, there's gonna be a ruler and there's gonna be the ruled.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter if it's for you, by you, but you're at some point there's still gonna be a higher up.
Yeah.
You know what I
Hierarchy.
mean? The pigs became Mr. Jones. The Animal Farm then became Manor Farm again. So
Yeah. It all restarted. And anybody that's going to read the book, this episode or this video is definitely going to be a spoiler. So, but again, the book isn't long. Like you could read through it in a couple hours.
Yeah.
So
enforcers and the equivalent of Stalin's secret police, the NKVD. Like Stalin, Napoleon used these vicious dogs to round up everyone who was perceived as a threat to his power, notably Snowball, and then carried out their exiles or executions. Boxer, the loyal and hardworking horse, symbolizes the dedicated but naive working class in both the Russian Revolution and broader Marxist ideology. His unwavering commitment to the cause makes him a tragic figure whose motto was "I will work harder," believing that the promised utopia was right around the corner, which led to his eventual exhaustion-induced death. The sheep of Animal Farm represent the easily manipulated masses who blindly follow the pigs without critical thinking, reflecting the role of propaganda and obedience in totalitarian states. The sheep could not read, so relied on propagandists to decide right from wrong for them. They had nothing to say except for slogans fed to them by the regime, mainly 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. This is analogous to people who use slogans in place of genuine thought, such as "Make America Great Again," "Black Lives Matter," "All Lives Matter," "My Body, My Choice," "Back to Blue,"
I'm glad
and "Free
he added all,
Palestine."
like the
All of
variety
these slogans do
everything.
very
It wasn't
little
just like-
other than display what ideological
Yeah, I
team
mean,
the sheep
people
of our
fall into
society
camps
are
really
on.
easy.
Lastly, Benjamin,
it's almost
the
our human
donkey
nature
on the
too,
farm, who is
right?
wise
Like,
but
it's like
deeply
our
cynical,
instinct to
only says
group
things
with
like, donkeys
sheep don't want
live
to
a
think,
long
bro. The sheep
time.
don't want to think.
He represents those with an understanding of history and are able to look past their immediate circumstances. Because of this, Benjamin feels doomed to watch society make the same mistakes as the past and becomes disillusioned and apathetic to the state of things. Now that we've established the characters and who they portray, let's dive into how the regime of Animal Farm used language manipulation as a form of psychological warfare. In George Orwell's Animal Farm, language manipulation plays a central role in the pigs' consolidation of power and the distortion of the original ideals of animalism.
This is what's happened with feminism today, right? It was all about empowerment of the women, which everybody's on board with. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
They treated equally in the workplace, treated equally in social environments. This is what everybody's about. But now that the word woman has been manipulated, feminism, like you have to draw a line somewhere, right? And so now it's like you hear trans women are women. That's the slogan they're given. And now feminism encompasses them too.
Yep.
Right. And so that's kind of what's happened now. And so they've rewrote the commandments of feminism in a sense. So it's just another way of seeing it in modern day culture too. So
yeah, and it's also a way of saying like moving the goalpost.
yeah, exactly.
Right? It's the same thing. Like it's always being moved to fit the new ideology, to kind of squeeze everything in to make it a new new way of thinking about feminism.
Yeah, and it's slow. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they didn't change all the commandments at once. They like changed one, and then they changed another one. And then,
and it's like a long period of time has passed. I think the best way I kind of adapted the way of learning that is someone, I can't remember where I learned it from, but they said ideology, slogans, any sort of group way of thinking will take 5 steps forward, or they'll take a mile and then only give you an inch. So they'll take 5 steps forward and only 2 steps back. And they'll continue to do that over a long period of time. So it's not instant. It's not something that gets a lot of pushback in a short period of time. It's a long game. They're playing the long game.
Yeah, Joe Rogan in one of his episodes was like, I've always been liberal. I've always voted, Democrat. But what's happened is I was a ship, and then the Democratic Party was a ship, and we were going parallel. But they altered 1 to 5 degrees. And over a period of 10, 20 years, it's gotten miles and miles
it's like
away.
super far apart.
And so now he's, you're a homeless politically.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's never like significant changes at once. Like Starbucks, they don't up their prices like $2 at once. Right. With this new thing in California that's going on with the minimum wage now $20. Let's say they'll up it 37 cents. And then like 6 months will go by, and then they'll add another 20 cents on it. And then they'll add another 20 cents on it. You can't make those significant changes right away, like big changes at once, because then there's like a shock.
Yeah, there's a shock.
So it's like you just kind of, it's like bending a stick. If you bend it really slow, it'll bend. But if you bend it really fast, it'll snap.
Yeah, my mom went to when you throw a rock into a pond, right? Like instant, like the ripples at the closest to the center are like the things that are going to be felt the most, but the further away you get from that. And I just think of like time.
Yeah.
Like, so that's kind of where I'm on. But it's I think a lot of this is almost just being replicated. And I wonder if we'll live through a time where I don't think we're there yet. Obviously there's ideologies that are being we're crawling. Pushing, we're crawling to stuff like this. Like we're slowly just moving ourselves into this as a nation. But there's so many, we're so divided. It's hard to kind of let's just look at history. I think a lot of people are aware, though. I would say a lot of people are understanding what's happening.
Have you heard the term silent majority?
Yeah, I've heard that it's changed a lot, though, especially with I think Florida is a good example, right? The silent majority became the actual majority, right?
Yeah.
Florida used to be a blue state for a really long time.
Yeah, always been kind of purplish.
Yeah, purplish, and then it finally completely flipped over.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that what was that word I just said? Silent majority.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people that you have conversations with, even here in California, you know what I mean? We live in California, everywhere around the world, especially here domestically in the United States, look at California as they call it California, right? You have conversations with normal people a lot of people are kind of on the same page, but they're silent.
Yeah.
And PBD, he talks about Christians being too tolerant.
Yeah, he talks about it a lot.
I think not just Christians alone, but just average people that maybe don't classify themselves as Christians are tolerant. They don't want to be perceived as mean, right? And so they tolerate these things, and we slowly tolerate more and more stuff, and there's no pushback. We end up at a place like Manor Farm, right? It's like at some point you have to stand on business and be like, I can't be tolerant of this. I can be tolerant of that. I can't be tolerant of this. You have to be able to draw lines, because if not, we're going to get baby stepped like that boat. You're going to end up way over on that boat that changed 5 degrees over 20 years. You're going to end up somebody you didn't even think you would end up. And so like the silent majority at some point has to talk. And if they don't, then we end up on Manor Farm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think I don't know how much anybody watching or even yourself like believes, like they slowly show us through movies, television, propaganda, like what the message is being pushed on us, right? We see that movie like Civil War, right? Like movies like that have never come out before. Well, I guess there has, but
I don't think I've seen it yet.
I don't
Civil
know.
War's the new one, right?
Yeah, the new one. But that's like
So what kind of American are you? I think I saw the trailer.
Yeah, and it's like what kind of American? And then what movie came out right before that? Like with the
Michelle Obama,
the Obama movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's like what's like ex-presidents are executively producing movies now. Like what? You know what I mean? So
it wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't about the downfall of America.
Yeah, it wasn't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree. I 100%
I haven't
agree.
seen
It
that
wasn't
one yet
about
either.
like a president talking about the downfall and giving insights on like what
How it's gonna
realistically like why not the good stuff? Why not like I know there's probably not too much good stuff, but like why not focus on that, even if it's just a little bit, or at least try to bring some sort of optimism back to the American spirit.
It's interesting too, because like in the past, like when radio was a big thing, you remember you'd be like, that song "Baby" by Justin Bieber, that was like the end of radio era. But you'd be like, man, I don't really like that song, but it would play on the radio so much, like you would end up singing it and you'd be like, it's not that bad. Actually, I kind of like it. So it's like so much, it just gets said so much and pushed so much that you like become accustomed to it, and then you end up liking it.
Sure.
So it's like, if it's in the movies, if it's in the music, if it's in YouTube, if it's in everything that you consume, at some point you're gonna be like, it's actually not that bad. Oh, actually, I kind of like that. So it's the same system or pattern where it's like just inundate them with so much of it that they end up liking it.
Yeah, it's almost too like even if you don't like it, you know that song off the top of your head.
Yeah, and you can recite the slogan.
Yeah, it's like you know it by memorization because it was pushed so heavily. It's so that's crazy to think about. So you don't even have to like it; you just know it just based on like the word "baby" and Justin Bieber, and you know exactly what everybody's talking about when you hear that.
I'm sure you can go around the world and say MAGA, and people don't know what it is because it's repeated so much.
One of my favorite quotes from the novel is, "This work was strictly voluntary, but any animal who absented himself from it would have his rations reduced by half," which is eerily reminiscent of a time where we were told that taking an experimental medication was voluntary, but anyone who doesn't get it will lose their job and be unable to access certain public spaces.
Grandma's gonna die. You better take it.
In the novel, the pigs, led by Napoleon and Squealer, skillfully and deceptively alter the original 7 commandments to suit their evolving needs and justify their actions. This manipulation reflects the pigs' hypocrisy and double standards. For instance, one of the original commandments stated no animal shall sleep in a bed, but after getting caught enjoying the luxuries they once deemed evil, the pigs alter it to no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets. After getting caught drinking, the pigs changed the commandment from no animal shall drink alcohol to no animal shall drink alcohol to excess. When Napoleon the dictator needed to rid the farm of all dissenters, he changed the commandment no animal shall kill any other animal to no animal shall kill.
It kind of is like the who's the greatest basketball player debate. Like at first it was rings, right? Michael Jordan's the best.
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, that guy, I forget his name, Ben, I forget his name, but he has 11 rings. Okay. Then, well, Michael Jordan has this many MVPs. Well, this guy also has this many MVPs plus rings. Okay. Well, then he has this many defensive players of the year. Oh, this guy has that many defensive players of the year. Oh, okay. Well, he has this many, he has a rookie of the year. He got this and this. So the goalpost moves every time because your heart's already set on who's the best player. So you have to like continue to change the commandment in order to make your desired outcome become the reality.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it makes me think of. Like I could say Kobe's my favorite, but it's not based on rings. You know what I mean? It's not based on, I could say he's the best player ever, but it's all because that's what I think.
Yeah, it's harder for me to wrap my mind around that just because it's especially sports and Hall of Fame and greatest of all time. Like it's very subjective where you grew up, what team you liked, because like if you ran into someone that was a huge Larry Bird fan, they would never mention Kobe as well. Maybe they would give the credit to Kobe.
Yeah, they'd mention Magic first.
Yeah, they wouldn't like because if you grew up like Celtics and Lakers hated each other
right
at one point, and they would always be in the championships against. Yeah, it's still there. The rivalry is still definitely there.
As a Lakers fan, I can say.
But back in the day, it was definitely like Larry Bird or like
Showtime Lakers.
Yeah, so it was a different, and so it's, at the end of the day, it's subjective. And so that's how I perceive it is. This can be subjective up until the point where it's affecting the lives of people. And then it becomes an objective thing. And then when you start moving that goalpost and people have to stand on commandments, I think that's where it starts to become a reality rather than like, okay, we're not voting on like this being the greatest basketball player anymore. We're voting on, if you don't agree this is the best basketball player, then we get to send you to execution. It's like, whoa, we've completely like just flipped that on its head. And so now it's not subjective anymore because there's action being taken on these decisions being
the
made.
goalposts. I don't know if any real goalposts are concrete anymore though.
Yeah, well, in today's age, it's really hard to define a goalpost because I think all of us were scared during 2020. You know, it scared the shit out of everybody. And then over time, it was just like, is this actually happening, or are we like almost being lied to, or like what? Like, are there people? How many people are actually dying? Like, what's actually happening? People losing their jobs. People like this.
You're canceled, bro.
Yeah, and it's
You're
like,
canceled, bro. I can't believe you just said that. No, straight up though, because during that time, you could look at it and be like, okay, well, I think at one point it's like there's a survival rate of 99.6, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, then I don't really have to worry about it, right? But grandma's gonna die. Grandma's gonna die. And by the older people are the ones that are dying, right? The kids don't, like, they can get it and there's no problem, but the kids have to get it too.
Isn't that happening too with the operation with sex changes, like where the parents will go in and there's stories of parents or like kids that are like just regretting their decisions, that are saying like, well, parents went through with it because the doctors or the psychiatrists or the therapist told them, well, would you want a dead daughter or son or a live trans child? And it's like, well, I don't like, that's really crazy. Like, it's hard to put yourself in that predicament because, one, I'm not a parent, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I would want to think that I would make the best decision for the future of my child. But what is the best? So it's like you're being pushed and the goalpost moves and you're like, oh, damn, I thought I was making the right decision. But now, like years later, it's almost like,
I think parents got to understand that kids are idiots.
Yeah, I was for sure.
I was an idiot. We were all idiots.
Yeah, I would not listen to if my mom let me do. Oh my god, I would have destroyed my life,
dude.
Seriously.
I mean, it makes me think of the power of fathers because I remember my mom and my dad were going through a tough time, and they were thinking about splitting up. Yeah. And I was like, as soon as my dad leaves, I'm gonna act up. I remember thinking that in my head. I remember being like, as soon as my dad leaves,
it's almost like a sense of relief. Like you could do whatever you want.
I can do whatever I want. Mom won't be able to do shit. That wooden spoon doesn't mean nothing to me now. You know what I mean? Yeah. But they didn't end up doing that, so thank God. But that father is kind of like the guardrails. Yeah, and then you see all these things going on, like the mom wants to transition their daughter or son or whatever, and the dad wants to not do that, and then the dude ends up in jail, no custody of the kid or in jail, and then it happens in Canada. Happened in Texas, I think.
Damn, that's
like they moved out of Texas, went to California. Mm-hmm. The dad lost custody. Yeah, and so it's like,
that's nuts.
Any other animal without cause. Another significant alteration involves the commandment, all animals are equal. As the pigs grow more corrupt and privileged, they add the phrase, but some animals are more equal than others. The manipulation of language and commandments demonstrates how those in power can use propaganda to rewrite history and control the narrative. The animals' inability to challenge these linguistic alterations underscore the pervasive influence of the ruling class, highlighting the danger of language manipulation and its role in justifying authoritarian rule. Now let's dive into how the pigs used propaganda-induced fear in order to maintain control over the citizens of Animal Farm. In George Orwell's Animal Farm, fear propaganda is a potent tool used by the pigs, particularly Napoleon, to control the animals on the farm and maintain their authoritarian rule. This fear propaganda is instrumental in suppressing dissent and maintaining loyalty to the regime. Public executions are a stark example of this fear propaganda. The pigs make a spectacle of punishing those who are deemed disloyal or traitorous, even if their only crime is questioning the pigs' authority. The quote, "Surely, comrades, you don't want Jones back," is repeatedly used to instill fear, reminding the animals of their past suffering under Mr. Jones and suggesting that any dissent might lead to his return. You see this frequently when politicians make sure the populace is utterly terrified of the boogeyman that they've created, which allows them to get away with anything, as they've created the illusion that they are the lesser of two evils. The atmosphere of fear intensifies as the farm descends into a totalitarian regime. The quote, "They had come to a time when no one dared speak his mind, when fierce growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes."
So, you remember how Napoleon took dogs from when they were born, like,
And hit 'em?
and hit them and raised them?
Where'd the dogs come from again?
There were just dogs on the farm,
So they're
and
just
then the dogs have kids, and then
Yeah.
Napoleon took them. I think what happened in society now is now they don't have to. They created dogs.
I think I know where you're going.
Right?
With this. Yeah, continue.
So it says they had come to a time when no one dared speak his mind, which is now silent majority. That's where that word comes from. Tolerant Christians. That's where it stems from this. When fierce growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes. So you're watching online. They've created Twitter dogs.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So like this is where cancellation is. You're not literally torn to pieces. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But you're
Physically, at
actually
least.
your whole your income, how you make money, your lifestyle, your reputation is torn to shreds based on one comment you make.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
So like I can't think of an example off the top of my head. If I think about it, I could. But you tweet something and then you're torn to shreds by online dogs,
Yeah.
and people feel like that reflects the real world. So you can't, like in the workplace, you can't communicate in a way that you normally would because everybody's a growling dog.
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah.
don't dare speak your mind.
Yeah, it's like what comedians went through for a long time.
Right.
Like
Exactly. Yeah.
you couldn't really be a comedian because you were afraid. And then I think Dave Chappelle really broke that wall down and kicked that shit. Was like, you guys already tried canceling my life previously.
The
before
dogs
all
tried to
this
come
shit.
after him, and,
Yeah.
and he was just like,
Yeah.
you have to get to a point. Joe Rogan calls it escape velocity,
Uh-huh.
where you get to a point where like people can say their things, the growling dogs can come after you, but it doesn't matter because you've achieved escape velocity, and whether that's includes finances, and includes reputations, like foundation, includes a lot of different things. But yeah, small time creators like us, we haven't achieved escape velocity, so you have to make sure you're stepping on solid ground when you're talking.
Yeah. And like, for anybody watching this that like may like question or like, we don't know what we're talking about. We don't ever come. I think this is the premise of our conversations when it comes to our podcast, vlogs, anything with Paradyme. That's why we came up with the name, because the way I think isn't the way Jay thinks. Jay thinks differently from John, and John has a different opinion than David.
Right.
But if we can sit down and have a discussion and disagree, I think we're making progress. So if you're watching this and like, well, you guys are crazy, like to think anything you're saying is factual, leave it in the comment section. We've already talked about discussing and having people on the podcast just to have a dialogue and going from there. But again, we're small time creators.
Right.
We're not trying to push the needle so far to where we're getting away from having conversations and telling people to think a certain way. Our whole thing is, let's title our podcast Paradyme, to open our lens, to expose ourselves to ways of thinking that we are not exposed to normally. And obviously we'll put ourselves in a category of like, well, we'll agree on most things, but that's just human instinct. Like, we're not going to want to be combative every conversation.
Right.
But it's good that we know and we've set the standard of like, our commandment is to be open and be thoughtful about opinions that we disagree with.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming at it from the lens of like a learner.
Yeah, 100 student, 100%.
Like, we're having a conversation, not like we know the answer. This book, Fahrenheit 451, that we're reading now, one of the quotes in the introduction was, if somebody tells you what a book is about, they're probably right. If they tell you that that's all the book is about, then they're definitely wrong. So that's kind of the lens that we're coming from, is like, we're telling you this is what we think the book is about, but we're not telling you that's all the book is about. And that applies to all of our different takes. We're not telling you this is exactly how it is. That's all it is. We're just saying this is kind of how we interpret it.
And this book is referencing history.
Right.
Like, this book isn't referencing something that has never happened before. This is actually things that have happened, and it's being pushed in an allegorical way through characters in a nonfiction book.
Yep.
So I think it's interesting. It's really cool to see it put in this sort of narration, especially with George Orwell being like a dystopian writer. Like,
probably one of the, if not
one
the
of
best.
the best. Yeah, one of the best. So again, us here at Paradyme, we're not here to get you to think the way we think. It's really to open the
When
conversation.
fierce, growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes. This exemplifies the terror that grips the animals. Fear is used to silence any opposition, fostering a climate of self-censorship and paranoia. Additionally, the concept of Napoleon is always right reinforces the idea that questioning their leadership is unacceptable. This psychological manipulation keeps the animals subservient and obedient despite the growing injustices on the farm. Fear propaganda is a central theme in the novel, illustrating how oppressive regimes use fear to maintain control, suppress dissent, and manipulate the minds of the population. Now, let's go over how those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it, and how Orwell depicts this in the novel. In George Orwell's Animal Farm, the theme of cyclical history is powerfully illustrated by the novel's ending, where the farm's condition after completing the Marxist Revolution mirrors the initial state under Mr. Jones. This cyclical pattern underscores the idea that revolutions and political upheavals often lead to a repetition of the past. As the story concludes, the pigs become indistinguishable from the humans they initially rebelled against. They walk on two legs, wear clothes, and engage in trade with the human farmers, just as Mr. Jones did. This mirrors the beginning of the novel when the animals revolted against human tyranny. The sense of cyclical history is further heightened by the reinstallation of the name Manor Farm instead of Animal Farm, as if nothing had changed at all. The animals' disillusionment is palpable as they observe these developments. They come to realize that the promised utopia of equality and freedom has transformed into a new tyranny under the pigs. This disillusionment emphasizes the tragic failure of the revolution and the betrayal of the animals' trust by those in power. The novel serves as a stark reminder that those who overthrow oppressive regimes often end up becoming oppressors themselves. Wow. So what lessons can we take
become
away
oppressor
from all
themselves?
this?
The people that were oppressed, right? So the enemy right now is the white guy, the white straight male. So by the people that were oppressed at one point turn around and they become oppressors, and now the person that's oppressed is the person that was the oppressor. So white men might have been they were the oppressors back in the past, and now they're becoming the oppressed by the people that were oppressed in the past. So by trying to fix what happened in the past, they become the very people that they were trying to slay. And that's kind of one of the overarching themes in the book.
What's that quote? Absolute power absolutely corrupts.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah, that's instantly what I think of, is trying to overthrow oppressors by becoming an oppressor. Like, you don't see it in real time. So it's hard to see that, because you need to let time play it out, and then you'll start to observe things that are happening. But if you're a historian, then you'll probably see things quicker than most people.
Yeah.
Just had a thought, I forgot. But yeah, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Like,
It's essential to think critically about the parallels between the story and real-world events. The tactics employed by the pigs on Animal Farm to control and manipulate the other animals serve as a stark reminder of the potential for abuse of power and the distortion of truth in political discourse. To gain a deeper understanding of these themes, definitely read or revisit Animal Farm. It's one of those books that every time you read, there's another layer revealed. I've read it upwards of 5 times myself and acquired a new perspective each time. The novel remains a thought-provoking and cautionary tale, inviting us to reflect on the consequences of unchecked authority and the impact of language manipulation on society.
yeah, that was a really good breakdown of the book, and I like how he explains absolute power. That was the best part. Absolute power.
The lessons.
Corrupts. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, if you're the most ignorant if you decide to not learn from the past. But if you decide to just take a peek at what happened previously, at least you have some awareness of where things come from and how things are created and how things move forward or backwards. I think it's kind of silly to think that like everything around us is new under the sun. That sticks to me to this day. John used to say it all the time, like there's nothing new under the sun. Everything's repeated. Especially being a creative and like a freelance videographer, is like how I think about things is like, go grab some original ideas from other people and mush them all together and then turn around and make it your own. So it's harder to tell where you got your initial inspiration from, because it's a package of inspirations and you just turned it on its head and made it your own, slapped your name on it.
I mean, that's what scientists do. It's the whole reference cited section of the papers. It's just like, I've got all these ideas, this is why I learned them, and here's how I'm applying them. Right, so thanks for checking out the video. Go check out Liam DeBoer. It's Liam DeBoer, Understanding George Orwell, Animal Farm Explained. Great video, very insightful. So appreciate your time, and
and we have our video out too. So if you guys want to get a glimpse at how we go over the book, check that out as well. Just go to the channel, hit subscribe, make sure you guys hit that like button to help the channel out. We're still slowly growing, but over this past 2 years, I think we've done a really good job. So if you like this content, go ahead and follow us and subscribe on all our social media pages.